Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fourth featured CARSP member video interview. My name is Dr. Emily McCullogh, and I am a postdoctoral research associate at York University and current editor of the CARSP Safety Network newsletter. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Dr. John Morrall, current president of the Canadian Highways Institute, former professor of civil engineering at the University of Calgary, and longstanding road safety advocate. John holds a PhD in transportation from the University of Waterloo and has received several awards for his contributions to transportation and road safety engineering. John, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. McCullogh.
So, can you start by just telling us a fun fact about yourself?
Oh, fun fact. Well, I'm in my 80s and I'm still working as a consultant. And agencies and consulting firms have been very good at giving me all the work I can do since I retired from the university 24 years ago.
You're still very valuable to them.
Well, I don't know, it might be just there's a shortage of people in road safety area and highway engineering area, or transportation engineering area, I should say, because all roads involve active transportation the last 10 years. So, yeah, it keeps me busy and engaged and meeting people I've known over the years and new people too.
Wonderful. So, how did you get involved in the road safety world?
Yeah, that's a good question. Uh, it wasn't as an undergraduate or when I started working, and my first job was down your way, actually, with a small group of engineers working on the GO Transit planning in the mid 60s. And it started operation very modestly along the lakeshore, but I wasn't involved in safety then or when I was working for DHO, now called MTO. And of course, safety was always mentioned, but not the way it is today. But how did I get involved? That's a good question. When I started at the University of Calgary, a few things happened. I got involved in research and planning and design for passing lanes on two-lane highways because of problems with crashes. And that was one area in a rural area. I also became a member of the Highway Capacity Manual on the two-lane highway section. And in the early beginnings, safety was considered part of highway capacity, but it wasn't implicit like it is today, explicitly included. So that was a small start there. And then just by accident, I got to be asked to be an expert witness on a rollover case where the road transitioned from 4 lanes to 2 lanes in a very short period of time without any warning or anything. And so that was my introduction to road safety as an expert witness. And then, of course, I always belonged to TAC and ITE committees going back into the 60s and as an undergraduate, actually, in the early 60s. And then when CARSP came along, I started attending CARSP conferences.
Great. May I ask, when was your first CARSP conference that you attended?
Oh, gee, I can't remember. It might have been one out in Calgary.
Okay, great.
Yes, it might have been one out in Calgary, a notable um, worldwide experts. One from Canada was attending, Ezra Hauer, for example, was at that meeting.
Oh, great.
And then there was another one that I helped organize at the local level with Dr. John Reed, who worked in the emergency area of the Foothills Hospital. And then I just come to mind, yeah, I'm just reaching back over the years on that. That was another CARSP conference held in Calgary, but slowly got into it at the area with organizations like CARSP and TAC, and now ITE has been in the safety area for a while too.
Yeah, great. So you've seen an evolution of this
Yes,
importance of safety being included in
right. Yes.
transportation engineering. Great. So as someone who's worked in the road safety world for several years, what are some of these important strides or markers of progress that you've seen in the Canadian context or globally with regards to road safety?
Okay, that's another good question, and it gave me some time to think about it. So I appreciate you sending me a note on what the question might be. So thinking back over my career, I think one of the first strides was seat belts in cars. Originally, I think it was in around 65 or 66, the Ford Motor Company offered seat belts as an option. And I think the price was around $60, and they were just lap belts. So I would say that was a beginning. Um, MAD, I would give a lot of credit for because they brought attention to the general public of drinking and driving. And I think that was quite important. Then the beginning of crash testing of vehicles in Europe and particularly in the United States and giving them ratings. Um, and other things too, like photo radar uh, came into play. And before that, the measurements of speed were done with a couple of tubes in the road, for example, and whatnot. But photo radar helped and more policing. So the public, the manufacturers of cars and the public agencies were starting to take safety much more cautiously. Down your way, I remember because I'm from down your way, is that in Toronto is the introduction of crosswalks, formalized crosswalks. So all these things started to come into play. And then on the design side, I'd like to mention a few things here. The first was the explicit evaluation of safety in road design. And this started actually, I can trace it back to the 60s with the clear zone idea, roadside safety and design. And measurements of safety performance functions and collision modification factors that have come along strong the last more than a decade. And as well as the adoption of Vision Zero by many agencies as a target, and the safe systems approach more recently. And I think those last two have been quite important because for engineers, and general analysis of who is causing and what's causing crashes, uh, the blame was always put on the driver and the road user, and that's now turned around to make designers of roads and transportation facilities think that let's look at what we're designing and let's see how we can improve designs. And things like the collision modification factors help in that regard, or safety performance functions. And in that regard, I'd like to give a lot of credit to Dr. Ezra Howard down your way as being one of the leaders in this area, not just in Canada, but he is acknowledged worldwide.
Wonderful. So there's been some significant strides, and I really appreciate you bringing up the Vision Zero target and the safe system approach um, as a system level issue, which road safety is, to have all folks responsible kind of aware of their role in creating those built environments, I think is a really important step. So thank you for sharing that. And it's really wonderful to see the progress. As a researcher in road safety currently, sometimes we kind of get bogged down in the current situation. And so it's really great to see and hear about some of the progress that's been made. So thank you for sharing.
Oh, that's you're quite welcome, Emily. And I just looking at my notes here I made for myself. Organizations again, like uh, TAC, CARSP, ITE deserve a lot of credit, especially CARSP because that brings together a whole range of people like ourselves, you and me, working in the in different areas, but all part of the road safety community, and we're learning from each others. I remember at one CARS conference after I gave my paper, is that someone in the audience asked a question that I'd never thought about it, and that person was in the medical profession, and he said, "Do you take into account the planning and location of hospitals when you design highways?" And I had to think about that really hard. And my answer was, well, not explicitly that I'm aware of, but it's certainly a good question because in the traffic engineering area, as you know, we take a lot of care to indicate how a driver should get to a hospital by the H sign quickly in case of emergency. Um, so the interdisciplinary aspect of road safety I've got to give a lot of emphasis on that. It certainly came along because it involves um, human factors people, people in enforcement, people in the medical profession. Um, I remember once I got invited over to talk to the doctors at Foothills Hospital, which is right beside the University of Calgary, where I was teaching. And they say, we see the victims of car crashes all the time, of course, in the emergency ward. And we're just wondering what engineers are doing with respect to road design and road safety. So um, that connection was made as well.
Yeah, what a great question from those folks.
Yes.
Yeah. Wonderful. Um, so what advice would you give folks who are interested in pursuing a career in road safety and road safety research?
Okay, another good question because these days for undergraduate students, and I'm just speaking of engineering, um, having taught at the university for a long period of time, is that there's so many choices, just so many choices for an undergraduate engineer to go into mechanical, electrical, chemical, civil, biomedical. It goes on, and it's just expanding exponentially. Um, So I think it's incumbent on universities and technical schools to uh, have an introductory course or two on road safety, just to spark an interest. And this can be done several ways. When I was a prof, I used to invite an engineer over who headed up the Transport Canada crash unit in Calgary when it existed. And and sometimes someone from the hospital as well that was saw the victims. So that's at the undergraduate level. But for young people graduating, and I'd include all disciplines here, although I've kind of been focusing on engineering here somewhat, is for those that are interested in road safety and hopefully at the undergraduate level, one of their professors has mentioned this in one way or another. But the next step would be what my advice would be to join organizations like CARSP, because they have facilities and the ability that they have the student paper competition, for example, that I've been involved with evaluating for um, Brenda for so many years. You know, I'm working on evaluating the abstracts right now. So, and then the next step will be the paper. So there's that opportunity, okay, to if you've got an idea, join CARSP. and write a paper.
That's great.
And there's a whole area for students to do that. Uh, Joining the Transportation Association of Canada is another area. And I know this might seem a little daunting for a recent graduate in any area, but you can sit as a friend of the committee initially and just listen to the proceedings. And there are student rates too for attending that conference. And the last one is to join the Institution of Transportation Engineering. And most cities in Canada, well, I shouldn't say most cities, but most medium to large cities, and certainly down your way in Toronto, there's many chapters, and there's one in Toronto, of course, Hamilton. I could go on and on here, but uh, the ITE has local chapters, and the local chapters usually have one meeting a month. And our local chapter here has a student paper competition, and so there's an opportunity to participate there and just hear a different speaker once a month. So joining these organizations, even as a friend of the committee, and then later on, once you're working professionally for a government organization or a consulting firm, to actually join one of the committees, there's just so many opportunities to get involved with helping to write the next edition of a design manual, for example, or a traffic signing and pavement marking manual. So those would be my suggestions for how to get started in the road safety area. And I haven't mentioned all the other areas here. I apologize for that a little bit. Um, I work with people, human factors experts, and you probably know some. There's some very notable ones down in your area that I have worked with, like Alison Smiley. And there's most largely cities have a human factors expert, or maybe two. And so I notice they're getting involved with road safety issues as well.
That's so wonderful, John. Thank you for sharing. There are some options there for folks that I would never have thought of, some opportunities for recent graduates to get involved in different committees and organizations. I think you're correct in that it feels kind of daunting
Yes.
to approach those big organizations, but it's nice to know that there's opportunities to be welcomed and to have input and to learn if you're interested in pursuing a career in this area. So thank you so much.
Yes. Oh, you're welcome.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience today before we sign off?
No, just that I appreciate the opportunity to pass on my experience here. And I think it's the job of people like myself to do mentoring. And I have been doing mentoring for a few larger companies because the full-time engineers are so busy that they've asked me to come in and talk once a month to the younger people. So I think that's another area that really needs exploring further that I haven't mentioned, because a number of the older folks in the road safety areas, they're, retiring or fading out of sight. And so the mentoring and knowledge transfer is very important at this stage from all areas, governments, universities, um, consulting firms, for example.
Right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today and with our CARSP audience.
Well, you're very welcome, Emily, and thank you for the good questions.
Yes.
Made me put on my thinking cap.
Anytime, John.
Okay.
And for our audience, if you're interested, or if you know anyone who may be interested in sharing their road safety wisdom and work in a future CARSP member interview like this one, please feel free to reach out to info@carsp.ca. Thank you so much, everyone, and until next time.